Hello, I am a compulsive rambler here to inflict my compulsion onto the internet and to talk about health and nutrition, and with a special focus, as this is my special interest, eating conditions of the body image related type, which is AN, BN, and BED, and I have a specific interest in, let's call it BED to be safe for YouTube. The one where you overconsume. I have a special interest in that because it's under attended to, and also it is a body image related obsession that doesn't get talked about enough, and because it's the one that's openly being promoted under the guise of fat acceptance. And that's the sort of thing I want to talk about today. A very familiar face to anyone in this sphere of the internet, Tess Holliday. Let's see what she has to say on British TV the other day.
Really say that I blame it 100% on GLP-1s or the weight loss jobs. I think that collectively our society has moved to a place where thinness is in, body positivity and curvy is no longer popular for a lot.
So that's interesting that she sees body positivity as not being part of thin is in, and I find that fascinating because thin used to, when we used to talk about that in the 90s of thin is in, what we meant was thinner than normal. Like what we meant was thinner than healthy usually. But this is the trick is that they are ignoring the fact that what is now typical and statistically normal in her country, the US, and in the country she's talking to now, the UK. What we now tend to mean by thin is literally just not fat. It literally just means healthy weight or underweight. It could be neither, and you don't know. And I think they like that vagueness of it. They like that you don't know when you say someone's thin what that means. But if you realize that really what is actually in is and has always been, for the most part, it's all the majority of people always like how healthy looks. They might vary in exactly what that can look like lots of different things. Like within a range of a healthy weight, you can look different ways, different distributions, different fat to muscle ratios. That's still seem to be, as far as we can tell, healthy, right? But what she doesn't talk about is the fact that even in the 90s, most people wanted to look like Lucy Lawless or Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I remember, I was there. Most people do not remember, most people who talk about the 90s nowadays don't even remember very well. But most people wanted to look healthy, even then, even though there were some underweight models and actresses allowed on TV. That's the only difference, is that they were allowed on TV and now they're basically like not allowed on there. And in the past, they were allowed on there, just like overweight and obese celebrities existed. You also had underweight, and they both got a lot of shit. They both got talked smack about. They both had people commenting on their bodies, gossiping about their bodies. Underweight and overweight. It was an equal opportunities thing. If you were not healthy weight looking, you got a lot of shit. And now it's just that all that's changed since the 90s is not that, yeah, thin is in has changed meaning because now it literally just means not fat, and instead, whereas it used to mean underweight, right? But she's not acknowledging that. And the other thing that's changed is that you don't really see underweight you do see underweight male celebrities. That's allowed. It's not as common just because there aren't many underweight people anymore like there were in the 80s. Like, not because they were poor, but you saw more underweight people in general. People weren't eating as much in general, so you saw more underweight celebrities, male, and you still see underweight male celebrities, but not really. You're not allowed to be underweight as a female on TV anymore. That's what's changed. And she's actually not talking about underweight people though. When she says thin is in, it would have to be that she just means healthy weight people are now being seen exclusively instead of over or underweight. It used to be the case that it was all healthy weight, and then you started to see more underweight and healthy weight as models, and then overweight people could still be actresses and musicians. And now it's the case, I would say, in the British and American media alike, you do see overweight and underweight musicians, but in the modeling world, you're not really seeing um too much of anything that's not just normal and average.
Lot of brands, and that's what we're seeing reflected on runways and magazines and media. My plus size colleagues around the world, they're not really working, so it's been
Well, I
really
mean,
disheartening to see.
Okay, is it disheartening that all those minus sized models, all the underweight models of the 90s couldn't get work? Did anyone cry a tear for them when they weren't being hired anymore? I don't really see how this is any different. Like you had slightly underweight people like Kate Moss, and now you've got mostly slightly overweight. Like most of the plus size models are not like Tess Holliday. Most plus size models are only overweight, class one obese. They're not massively overweight, and most of the underweight models of the 90s that were on runways and things were not actually seriously underweight. They were slightly underweight, right? And now, now they're moving towards not as much of either of those things. I don't really care either way, to be honest. I don't think underweight or overweight models should be banned. I don't see how that helps anything, especially when we're talking about catalogs. Like you need to see like fashion modeling that's not on a runway where you're just selling clothes to the customers. Well, the customers want to know what their body will look like. It's not telling people to look a certain way. It's that if you take it that way, that's on you. Like it's I don't have a problem with underweight or overweight models in and of itself. That is not a problem to me at all. I don't see how you could come to the conclusion that it's a bad thing to see people who are not perfectly healthy modeling clothes, because you know that people who are not perfectly healthy buy clothes and want to see what it's going to look like on them.
I imagine it is tough. I mean, I've got a few friends actually that have been taking the jabs, and they tell me that it's been life transforming, and I can see it in their eyes. They feel so positive.
I personally don't know anybody who's talking about it. I know people, like, I know I've got friends and family who say they know someone, but I personally, no one has told me themselves, oh, I'm on it, or I haven't heard anyone that I know say. And if I did, I would have precisely zero reaction. I think that the healthy person who's never had any of these problems, like these psychological problems with body image obsession and food obsession and feeling guilty about what you eat or don't eat, whatever, things like that. I think for most people, you could have an opinion on is it healthy or not. I think you should be happy for people who find a way to eat less if they were struggling to eat less before and now they can. I don't have a problem with that at all. And it's really weird that anyone would have a problem with something. Like if someone took a medication that helps them eat more, which does exist, there are things you can take. I know someone in my family as a little girl was underweight. She just didn't have any appetite. They gave her some mysterious substance from back in the 1940s or whatever, and it made her suddenly have an appetite. That exists. And I don't see why anyone should be like, that's cheating. It's a really weird attitude, like, because it's not a game. It's a really serious thing. It's not like a game that you're winning or losing and competing with others on, unless you have an eating obsession, unless you have a body image obsession, and then it is a game to you. It's a game that you play as a distraction from other issues in your life.
Incredible body positivity because they feel in control of their body in a way they didn't before. So for them, this has been transformative.
Absolutely. I think that they are amazing for so many people. And I think that it has given people access to control kind of their bodies, maybe in ways that they hadn't previously. I do think that there is duality.
Okay, I appreciate Tess for not just shitting on them in general. That's nice to hear one of these people saying something that isn't just no one should take them, you're vain, blah, blah, blah.
I think that they're great, but just like anything that's great, people overuse.
And just for the record, I've never taken them. I lost weight without them, and I was only briefly that big anyway. So I mean, it would have been weird for me to admit, because I gained weight just a few, like 2023, and it would have been really weird to be like, well, I've never had to go on a diet before, but then we immediately go on these drugs. That would have been strange if I'd even heard of them, which I don't think I had. So no, I personally haven't done. But if I had struggled for years with my weight, that would be a different situation. If I'd always been someone who, for whatever reason, medical or psychological, struggled to not overeat, I would consider it, I guess, but that wasn't my situation. Like, it would have been a crazy leap for me to go to, oh wait, I've eaten myself fat this year. Let me immediately go on this, drug. That would have been, I think, too much. But that doesn't mean I'm against them. It just means, I think people have to evaluate their own situation. And even if I had heard of them back then, which I don't remember if I have had or not, I might have done. I don't think I would have gone on them just because, I think, if it's better to not take the risks of side effects and take the risks of complications from a substance like that when you don't need to. It maybe be not a last resort necessarily, but it shouldn't be your first. It shouldn't be the first thing you try. Like, you should just try it without that stuff first, in my opinion. That's my only opinion on it.
Abuse it, etc. And I think ever since 2020, there's been a rapid decline in diversity overall. And so I think it's
You need
just
to be
kind
more specific. What do you mean? A rapid in diversity overall? I wish she went into detail on what she means by that.
of perfect storm of like the jobs and, where our culture is at right now.
So she does see the jabs as part of a culture change and not just as a health thing. So she's kind of saying it can be a health thing, I guess, by saying that it's not all bad for everyone. But I don't know. I guess that's true. Like it can just be done for vanity, and some people, I'm sure. Well, I know actually. I know for a fact. I've heard of stories of people who are not overweight using them. Which is not what they're meant, and not diabetic either, or not having any of the conditions they're approved for, or that they could even theoretically help. But that's something that anyone can abuse. Any medical people could abuse any um medication. Like famously, people abuse like over-the-counter painkillers for the purpose of unaliving. Does that mean like those things are bad?
I wonder whether it's about the extremes. I mean, you might be aware in this country there's been various ads that have been banned only this year where models have seemed too thin. And in many respects, the look that appears to be perhaps the most popular and celebrated is a kind of healthy body. One of my great heroes, for example...
Always has been. When you talk about most celebrated, not the only type that's celebrated, there are people who like people who look a bit too thin. Like there are some celebrities who are a bit too thin, probably, who look a bit underweight, not massively underweight ever, but there's always a celebrity that is a bit underweight or a bit overweight, and people are still into them. Peter Murphy, the godfather, I would argue, of gothic rock, of the gothic music subculture.
Of the like erotic, of the distant, isolated, subtle like eroticism, which goes with the rocking. Like it's like the shaman of old who could actually sort of command with his charisma. The vampire's got that sort of feel. The perfect rock star, really. Like he can't have sex, physical sex, but with his victims or his audience, But he can have that sort of like erotic link with them. It sucks energy out of an audience, which Bauhaus certainly did. Mm-hmm. Like I hopefully give more.
Sexiest man alive, probably. It looks to me underweight. I don't know. I don't even know if I can tell visually like where the line is, but I would say he looks kind of underweight. I mean, like back in the 80s and 90s, he was utterly the sexiest man. He exudes it. It's his demeanor, the way he dresses, the way he does his makeup. It suits his body. It suits the way his body looks. Whereas if he'd just been like a bloke, like drinking beer down the pub, and not being like this vampire, like this sexy vampire type air that he had about him, then it wouldn't, that same body wouldn't be attractive. Bowie, I'm not saying he was a vampire, but there were quite a few men who were underweight. People find them attractive. There were quite a few women and men who are a bit overweight. Again, it's usually not greatly overweight. That becomes something that only like a smaller minority of the population are into. But there are people who like, Barry White, very attractive even when he gained weight. Tom Jones, attractive when he gained weight. I'm talking about the men because it's easier for me to it's easier for me to have a awareness of that because I talk to more straight women and I sort of and including older women than myself, so I'm sort of aware of intergenerational, like who was a sex symbol at what time and who wasn't, from the female perspective. And a lot of women were into slightly overweight guys and slightly underweight guys, and I think it's probably the same with women sex symbols. They could be a little overweight, a little underweight, and quite a few people will still be into them. But the extremes, it's at least taboo to even admit that you're into someone who looks really bony, and it's embarrassing, it seems, to admit that you like someone who's really too fat. I think the attitude should be similar to both. It shouldn't be like, because I think we just don't take obesity as seriously as we take the other end. Therefore, it's seen as like, oh, it's funny that you're into really big people. I don't think it's funny, especially if you're actually wanting people to get bigger and bigger. There's nothing funny about that. That's like, I don't know. I'm not saying get help. I would say don't act on it. Like, keep that fantasy in your head. I'm not kink shaming. Write stories and I don't know, cartoons or whatever, like that satisfy that fantasy. Don't inflict it upon a real human being.
Lizzo has, been very open about her weight loss journey. I wonder whether you'd kind of celebrate that rather than, a plus-size body or a too thin body, but trying to achieve a body that best represents health.
Yes, thank you. I don't know why this isn't asked more often when this subject comes up. It's crazy to me that it's not brought up more often. I don't know if this guy is just so out of the loop that he's able to bring like a fresh perspective to it, because a lot of people who like talk about this stuff more often, I notice, they don't even think to ask that question of, hey, isn't it kind of similar to promote being too big as to promote being too slim? Like, isn't it kind of the same? Like, but most people don't bring that up, or I don't know if they just think it's too obvious to bring up. But like, no, it's just, if it's not being brought up, it needs to be brought up, because it's, if it feels too obvious to say it, it's too obvious because it is such an obvious point. Like, it's not that it's wrong.
I think that it's really hard to look at somebody and tell whether or not they're healthy. I know you mentioned extremes, and I can understand what you're saying, but I think overall, what I would love to be celebrated, and I feel like a lot of people, is just, how we exist, diversity in general. I think it
But so she does see what he means about the extremes, and he was talking about the fact that too thin models. I don't even know who he means, right? I'm going to assume that they were underweight. I'm just going to assume that for the sake of argument. I haven't actually looked into it, so I can't give a firm opinion. But let's say for the sake of argument, and I'm pretty confident they wouldn't have banned someone who wasn't actually medically underweight. I don't, because of like legal reasons. You would have to prove like your BMI is this. You'd have to. I think in this country, you can't just fire someone like that without having like an objective reason. So they couldn't just say, in our opinion, you look too thin. They would have to actually medicate, in my opinion. So I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume, for the sake of argument, that these women were actually underweight, and that's why they got banned. And so by that same standard, if anyone is overweight by whatever standard they use, whether it was BMI or body fat index or whatever else, it should be the same. But Tess is saying, yes, I understand about the extremes. I doubt that those women were extremely underweight in the way that she is extremely overweight. I'm sure they were underweight to some degree. Just wouldn't have got a foot in the door. They wouldn't have been anywhere near they wouldn't have had the chance to get fired because they wouldn't have been hired in the first place. It's hard to make the exact comparison, like where is it? I'm not really sure. But like, she's up, I would say she is in the extreme of overweight at this point. And but a lot of the underweight models that are being banned are not in the extreme. They're mostly, if you are a model and you're underweight, it's usually only mild to moderate underweight. It's like somewhat below the cutoff threshold, but it's not like crazy low. Whereas a lot of, like, well, not most, but Tess Holliday is an example of a plus size model. Jordan Underwood is another one. They are extreme. They are actually extreme, and so it's really weird that Tess is saying, we don't know, we don't think that you can know how unhealthy someone is by looking at them. Well, then shouldn't you have the same opinion about the thin models that got banned? And what do you even mean that you agree about the extremes? Do you think that you're not in the extreme and that those underweight models who got banned were in the extreme?
would be nice to see different body sizes and shapes and ranges.
But not the too thin ones. You need to at least then address what he said about the fact that too thin ones were being banned. Like, if this is a discrimination issue, this is like job discrimination. This is people's livelihoods now. I mean, sure, they can gain weight just as you can lose weight, but the fact is, like, they are being fired and being told, if you want to this job, you have to change your weight. And how is that different? I don't understand how she cannot see the point here, or if she's just
as a whole. So,
ignoring it.
that's what I would love to see more of.
Body diversity, but only above healthy. No, never healthy. I don't even think she wants to see healthy models. I think she only wants to see people who are at least overweight, because just from what she's saying about thin is in being a bad thing, when, as that man pointed out quite rightly, what models are being used are mostly healthy weight range. Sure, mostly they lean towards the lower end of healthy weight, but they're still in the healthy weight range, and she seems to think there's something wrong with that. And by the way, there's a evolutionary reason why we like to look on the lower end of healthy body fat percentage and lower end of, especially women, like overall weight as well. And for men, even men, they don't necessarily want to look light, but they do want to look lean. It's for evolutionary reasons. We used to have to run for miles and miles and miles. We used to run for hours and hours, right? Chasing prey until they overheated before we did. And we're endurance runners as a species, evolutionarily speaking. So if you look at endurance running elites like Eliud Kipchoge and, you know, marathon runners, there's a reason they tend to be on the lower end of healthy or slightly under the cutoff point of healthy BMI, because it does give you a performance advantage and a longevity of career advantage when you don't have weight crushing you down, crushing your joints long term, and you're not slowed down, you're not overheating as easily. It is, and you know, so it's only natural actually that humans like to look on the lower end of healthy. As long as you're a healthy weight, I don't see what the big deal is.
Couldn't agree more. And you obviously feel very healthy, don't you? And celebrate your health and your.
You obviously feel healthy. That's a weird question. So I don't understand really that question. I guess I don't know if this anchor, and I'm sorry, I think her name's Kate. I do know her very well. If any British people watching, I'm not like that out of the loop. Of course, I've seen this woman before. I'm just blanking on her name. I believe her name is Kate, but I might be thinking of a different person. Like I know she's a very famous anchor here, absolutely very famous. But I'm just saying I can't remember her name right now. I think I'm just going to call her Kate, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong. I don't think she's ever been overweight. I've never seen her overweight, at least never on TV, and she's been on TV, it seems, for my whole life, forever. And so I'm going to go out on a limb and say she might be familiar with Tess and know that Tess claims to be healthy, although Tess has also claimed not to be healthy. Tess has claimed to have a chronic illness. She doesn't go into detail, but she's on an anti-inflammatory diet, supposedly, for this chronic illness. So she might have seen one of the videos where Tess says she is healthy. So maybe that's where she's getting that from. Or maybe she just assumes that no one would promote this unless they were healthy, which is a false assumption to make, but I can understand her making that assumption. I think she genuinely probably believes that you can be healthy at that size, specifically because she's never been overweight. She doesn't know what it feels like. She's never experienced it herself, and people don't talk about it as freely as it would help if they did, like the chub rub or the overheating, the increased exhaustion. People don't talk about that. As common as obesity is, it gives the false impression to think people who've never been overweight that it can't be that bad, and so the fact that she has not overeaten, you don't know why she's not overeaten. She might just naturally not have an excessive appetite, you know, and or she might have a super healthy diet that means that she just, not genetically, but environmentally, her appetite isn't being made too high. Or she could really care about her appearance, but it's entirely possible that she genuinely is clueless about the fact that you cannot be physically comfortable at this size unless you had that genetic issue where you can't feel pain. That is the only way in which you would not feel like your knees hurting, especially by the age of 40 plus, which Tess is. But this woman probably doesn't know that. I didn't know that until I gained the weight, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't even get like anywhere near as Tess's size, and I was like, oh my gosh, this feels really bad. Like I'm tired, I'm panting up the stairs with my asthma's got so much worse. The sweat, the overheating, everything.
In a way that's very positive. There will be some that argue that we have an obesity crisis in our country. We have huge concern about people being overweight. And in a sense, you know, we have to be careful. You might be, well, you're gorgeous, clearly, and healthy, but others who are your size might not be.
They might not be, but, you know, at the end of the
Kate is of the opinion that yes, it makes it more likely that you'll be unhealthy, it would seem, but she doesn't understand that by the time you get to Tess's current size, you are definitely reducing your quality of life and your capacity to do things at the very least. And if you don't currently have, you might genetically or other environmental reasons be more resistant to developing various complications. We all have different predispositions to different complications in different situations, but you are definitely building. There is no way that you would not have some kind of hormonal imbalance, even if it's not the sort of thing that gets tested for, because we have many more chemical reactions in our bodies than are ever tested for in routine medicine. You don't, you know, the vast majority of things that are going on in your body are never measured and tested by a doctor. It's just a tiny little fraction of things that are currently used in routine medicine. So you can have all kinds of imbalances and bad things happening in your body that are never tested for, that there is no blood test for, or which the blood test is not a routine thing. By the time you get to this size, especially at her age, you are suffering. But why would this woman know that? We don't talk about it. We kind of sweep it under the rug. We sweep all discomfort and pain under the rug because, you know, people don't want to hear others complaining. And there's a downside to that, which is that for preventable things, I think we should complain more. I wish people complained, I would never have become overweight. let myself eat all that much that year. Yeah, just for something to do. Stuck at home with ADHD, you know, dopamine mining. I wouldn't have done that if I'd known. If people had moaned as much as I think it deserves moaning about.
Today, we are all deserving of respect. We're all deserving to take up space. That's why, you know, I wrote a new book that
Okay, are the too thin models? I don't mean to do air quotes to imply they're not too thin. I'm just saying like that's what he called them. So we don't know what that really means, but I'm sure they were somewhat underweight. Why don't the too thin models also get this? Like, oh, well, we need to show people respect, and we apparently have to respect them by showing them on as models. Like, I'm not saying ban any type of person, unhealthy or not. I'm not saying we should ban them. I just think it's a really weird standard to say that if you don't put them on the runway, it means you're not respecting them. That's weird. But you know, I don't see old people complaining that they are being disrespected by models not being in their 80s. You know, it's not disrespect just to not be chosen as a model.
came out in the UK
I'm
not too long
5'1". No model is my height, and I don't feel like personally like disrespected by that. It's just they've got their reasons for wanting taller models, and it's not disrespect to short people.
ago called Take Up Space, y'all. And it really is about just reclaiming your space and taking up space. And, you know,
Well, I didn't have
regardless
a
of whether
sure.
we're, quote, healthy or not, we matter. And, you know, I think that we deserve
Of
to be
course.
seen as
We deserve to be seen, we matter. Like, so that means that just because being unhealthy doesn't mean that you don't matter. Therefore, in her reasoning jump is therefore we deserve to be models on runways and stuff. But that doesn't make any sense. And she said that she understood the man's point about extremes, about the not having thin models. So, like, is she? It seems like she's trying just not to answer the question in a clear way all the time. Like she's trying to be as vague enough that more people will agree with her. Like letting you fill in the blanks of what she's not saying. That's what I think she's doing.
well.
So I know you're concerned that you haven't been booked for a long time. If you don't get more bookings, what will you do?
I'm not that concerned. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to you guys, so it's not all
Which is
bad, is
lovely.
I
it?
have to
But
wonder. I seriously have to wonder if that was a little dig. I don't know if Tess is like quick. Maybe she is mentally quick enough to have intended that as a dig. Because I interpret that as like, well, I'm here with you. So if I'm like not that successful, then neither like this show is obviously like a tin pot show because why have you got me on? I don't know. That's how I interpreted it a little bit, but it might be that that wasn't intended at all.
I'm not I'm not going anywhere. You guys are stuck with me. I think like anything, we you know, body trends are a thing. We've seen it from the 1800s where bigger bodies were glorified.
Yeah, corsets famously were designed to make women look fat. Of course, yeah, we loved fatness so much that we like overly it compressed our waist so that we could barely breathe. Sure, yeah.
And through the end of time where
And
bodies
that
have
was
changed.
mostly rich women doing that. Like it was always rich people throughout European history did not want to be fat. Henry VIII did not enjoy being fat. He didn't do it on purpose. It wasn't cool. It wasn't sexy. like it was never because it's, you know, not healthy and instinctively as human beings, we don't want to look we don't want to look on a primitive primal level. We don't want to look like we couldn't like run after an antelope. It comes down to that. We don't want to look like we would overheat in Africa where we evolved. Most of our physical evolution, even if like your ancestry, we think of like I think of myself as European ancestry. I still ultimately my ancestry is Africa. Everyone ultimately comes from Africa, and most of our evolution, you know, the tiny bit at the end where okay, you know, skin got paler because you moved out of the hot sun and stuff. Apart from that tiny like few thousand years at the end where some of us have got slightly different adaptations to different climates now, most of us, well, everyone, most of our body is evolved in Africa. Most of the features on us, you know, apart from a few things that just at the very end have evolved in Africa. So we're supposed to like not need that much body fat. It was hot, you know. We're supposed to run after animals until they overheat and we don't. So The idea that like anytime, no, most of the time when they say people glorified obesity, people glorify obesity now. You've got chubby. I think chubby chasers have always existed. Bone chasers have always existed. You'll always get people who are attracted to really bony people, like specifically, and really big people specifically. And a lot of people, maybe most, are not super swayed by weight so much that they can't be attracted to someone who's a different weight than they like. Like most of us, as I say, a lot of people like Barry White, a lot of people like Peter Murphy, a lot of people, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people will like both men at the same time because weight doesn't come into it so overwhelmingly importantly for everyone. I don't think humans are like human attraction is it's kind of consistent across the years in my opinion, but it's also that doesn't mean it's super narrow. Like it's always been like different people like different things, and it just clusters around a mean, which is the mean of how it helped our bodies to be when we were evolving most of our current features.
You know, I think that it will shift back to
anyone who ate too much in the plains of Africa would have eaten themselves to the point where they couldn't run after animals anymore or run away, or, you know, be agile enough to like dodge an attack from an animal and then use a weapon to, you know, defending ourselves. We wouldn't sprint away from an animal very well, but we could be agile enough that, oh gosh, there's a tiger, or, well, not in Africa, a lion attacking us or wherever, we could use our teamwork and weapons, but we'd have to still be agile. We couldn't eat ourselves to the point where we overheated easily and couldn't do persistence hunting easily anymore, you know. So we don't want a partner who overeats, because partners who overeat, they would get more foot and lower joint wear and tear and risk of acute injuries the more weight you have on your lower joints. You know, it's so many reasons why we wouldn't have wanted partners who overate and took up the tribe's precious food supply to themselves more, you know. It kind of just makes sense. It's not some deep philosophical issue or some conspiracy by some elite group out there. It's literally just evolution, in my opinion.
To a place where you guys are going to be absolutely sick of me. You're going to see me and a bunch of other people everywhere. You'd really say that I blame.
No, I just think that she is trying to, honestly, I don't even think she cares that much about GLP-1s. I'm not getting that feeling from her. I think she's just trying to plug her book right now. My biggest issue is really still with what she said at the very beginning, the whole saying thin is in the context of GLP-1s. There's no other way to interpret that really, other than her saying that trying to get to a healthy weight, which is what the GLP-1s are overwhelmingly used for, trying to get to a healthy weight, she is saying that's a bad thing. That's part of a negative trend that people want to get to a healthy weight. Always remember, when someone says thin, ask what they really mean by thin. In her case, she's talking about what doctors would call a healthy weight. She will never use that phrase. She will never say healthy range, because she doesn't really believe that there's such thing as healthy and unhealthy ranges of weight. She thinks all weight ranges are equally healthy. That's what they believe in this movement. So she will never actually say healthy weight, but she's talking about the range of bodies that are actually in their healthiest state. And she's saying that's thin and that's bad, that people want that. So it is still promoting an unhealthy lifestyle, and I disapprove. But I hope she gets better. I truly hope that she does find a way out of this. She's getting to an age now where it's obviously going to be very uncomfortable for her. Increasingly, she's going to get more and more health problems. And I do have hope for her still, that she can turn it around. She might have to go out of the public eye for a while to do that. I don't know if it would be great for her to be in the public eye with all that going on, but I do hope for her that she will turn it around before it's too late for her. I really don't wish her any ill. I really disapprove of the message.